Cider. It's hard to think of a drink more synonymous with the Westcountry than cider. It's been a vital element of the cultural, economic and even spiritual life of the Westcountry for centuries, and is certain to remain so for centuries longer. The style of cider most associated with the Westcountry is known as scrumpy. If the only ciders you've tried so far have either been the unfiltered apple juice sold in the US, or the very sweet, very bubbly varieties sold in most pubs, then the taste of scrumpy is likely to surprise you. Traditionally, it's made from specific varieties of cider apple that are far closer to cooking apples than the kind we put in our fruit bowls. They're roughly chopped before being milled into a pulp, which is then spread between multiple layers of cloth, or more traditionally straw, to form a cheese which is then pressed to extract the juice. This juice is then decanted into oak barrels where the wild yeasts present on the apple skins ferment it into cider. The end product is cloudy, uncarbonated and very strong, usually about 6 to 8%, with a high natural sugar content but a dry and tannic flavour. Historically, it would be produced in relatively small batches by individual farmhouses, either for domestic consumption or to be used as part payment for farm labourers. While this was supposedly outlawed in the 1870s, it continued well into the 20th century, to the point that even my mother can remember being told stories about local labourers visiting different farmhouses to see which one had the best scrumpy before choosing where to work at harvest time. As well as being given a very generous daily allowance as part of their wages, sometimes around 6 to 8 pints, farmers would often leave jugs of scrumpy at the end of each field to motivate those who were gathering in the crops. In those days, scrumpy not only provided an alcoholic morale boost during hard physical labour, it was also a valuable source of calories and vitamin C to those whose diets were often severely lacking in both. Even today, it's still referred to as Westcountry Lucozade in some circles. While this is usually said with the tongue firmly lodged in the cheek, I often found myself craving a pint around midday while I was hiking the path, and definitely felt more energised afterwards. However, you do need to be careful not to overdo it, as the combination of a high alcohol content and a lot of sugar can send you a bit loopy if you drink too much too quickly. All of us have a story about some tourist, usually a Londoner, walking into a pub and brashly ordering the strongest cider they've got before either falling on their arse or getting carried out after 2 or 3 pints. As for who started making cider in the Westcountry, that's up for debate. It's generally agreed that the Romans brought the first apple varieties over to Britain after their invasion, but that seems to be just about all that can be agreed on. As with most things of cultural significance, every area tends to claim that they were the first to make it. In my own county, Dorset, the story goes that a couple of monks from northern France settled in a village near Bridport and taught the locals how to make it. On the other hand, the significance of cider in the wassailing traditions of Somerset would suggest that cider production occurred in the Westcountry much earlier. For those that don't know, wassailing is essentially a form of aggressive drunken trick-or-treating dating back to the Anglo-Saxons, where revellers go from house to house greeting the homeowners with cries of "Wassail," be well, while spreading good cheer in exchange for donations of food and drink. In Somerset, this procession is also led around the local orchards, either by the wassail king and queen, or a figure dressed as the Green Man, where they sing to the health of the trees, leave offerings of cider, and generally make as much noise as possible to scare away evil spirits and guarantee a good harvest. Personally, I think cider is just one of those things that was invented by a lot of different people at a lot of different times. After all, if there's one thing we can agree on about humankind, it's that we'll figure out a way to ferment and drink any sort of fruit or grain we come across in this wide world of ours. Aside from the traditional varieties of scrumpy, we've got a whole host of ciders here, from mass market crowd pleasers to artisanal varieties utilising everything from rhubarb to elderflower to mango. I've included a list here of some you might want to try while you're visiting. There's hundreds of different varieties, so this is absolutely not an exhaustive list. Just a few recommendations, and some you should absolutely avoid. So, to begin with, mass market ciders. You'll be hard pressed to find a pub in the Westcountry that doesn't serve at least one of these, either in bottles or from the tap. Anything by Thatcher's is good, Thatcher's Gold, Thatcher's Haze and Thatcher's Vintage especially. Orchard Pig, Old Moot, they're also good ones. One of the best ones from Cornwall is Rattler. The purists will probably want to shoot me for saying this, but make sure you try the pineapple Rattler, it's absolutely gorgeous. Then there's artisanal ciders. These are usually available either in bottles or from cardboard tap boxes in pubs with a slightly better range. Anything by Lily's Cider is really good, especially Old Rosie and Fire Dancer. Then there's Jack Rat, Devon Red, or anything by the Stanford Orchards really, and then things like Rapscallion and Hunt's. Then there's specialist ciders. These are usually only available from the barrel at a specialist cider pub or in a plastic jug straight from a farmhouse. Examples include Chucklead Cider, Roger Wilkins Dry Farmhouse Cider and Burrow Hill Medium Dry Farmhouse Cider. However, a lot of the best are done in very small batches and only served in 1 or 2 local pubs like the Red Lion in Swanage. When you visit these pubs, read the cider board and ask the bartender for their recommendations. Now, these are the ones to avoid. Do yourself a favour and just don't bother with these. Strongbow and Strongbow Dark Fruits. I swear Dark Fruits is just Ribena and grain alcohol mixed together. Blackthorn, little bit dry for my taste. Savannah Dry. Any place that sells a South African cider in the West Country is irredeemably wanky. Magners, Bulmers, or almost anything else that gets served over ice. And then absolutely avoid anything with frosty or white in the name. For example, White Lightning, Diamond White, Frosty Jack. These are an absolute abomination and only meant for committed alcoholics or teenagers drinking on park benches.